Hello, welcome to WeatherWise. I am your host, meteorologist Nathan Scott. Summer has arrived officially here in the Northern Hemisphere, and you probably have heard the term heat dome, dome of heat, death ridge, all across the news, on TV, and also on social media. So therefore, we're going to heat things up on this episode of WeatherWise, talk about what is a heat dome, how it impacts you at home, also some sizzling statistics here in Arkansas, the hottest temperatures on record. Talk about the heat index or the feels like number. How does that come all about in the first place? And maybe something you've never heard before, or maybe you have, which may replace the heat index in the future. I'm talking about the wet bulb globe temperature. Finally, we'll close things out with some heat safety tips. So let's start off here with the graphic. Talk about the dome of heat. And this is when the jet stream takes a hike well to the north. Here's what it looks like. You see the jet stream moving into the Great Lakes. Meanwhile, the western side of the country in this scenario is experiencing temperatures well below average. And this did happen in the middle part of June, where they had some snow in the northern Rockies. Meanwhile, we baked across the mid-south, especially the East Coast, where this core of the dome was situated right over the mid-Atlantic and also the Tennessee Valley. With this dome of heat in place, it can stick around for a few days or it can linger for a few weeks. Just depends on if the weather pattern is stagnant or not. The dome of heat, we call it that because underneath this dome, that area of high pressure, the air is sinking, it's compressing, and therefore you typically don't get organized shower and thunderstorm systems to develop, although you can still get those daytime garden variety pop-up showers and thunderstorms that do happen on occasion, or maybe the sea breeze coming in from the Gulf Coast or the Atlantic as well. So here's the breakdown. Under the dome, air sinks, it compresses, you reach your maximum potential heating, especially if that center of the ridge is located over a certain part of the country. You can see temperatures upper 90s, low 100s if the environmental conditions are in favor of it, and I'll explain more on that in just 1 second. And then if you have this dome of heat that sticks around for a long period of time, yes, it leads to heat waves, but also droughts, because this acts like a blocking wall to any organized systems. With something like this in place, you don't have cold fronts, you don't have low pressure systems that can actually penetrate through this wall that's surrounding that dome of heat. So when we take a look what's happening on the outskirts of this dome, it's an entirely different story. We actually call it the ring of fire because they're not under the protective layer of that dome of heat. So you have lots of shower and thunderstorm activity on the edge of this dome, and also potential of severe weather. You can get some nasty severe storms on the edge of this dome that may develop, say for this example, into Minnesota, Wisconsin. It could be a complex of storms, an MCS, a mesoscale convective system, or an MCC, known as a mesoscale convective complex, that may develop here in Minnesota, and it's going to follow around the edge of the dome of heat and then eventually impact, in this case, upstate New York or New England with the potential of severe weather. So you have to know what the weather pattern's doing, because that will give you inclination on whether or not you may have some severe thunderstorms rolling into your neighborhood if it does follow this pattern. We have to talk about what's happening at the surface. Yeah, you have a dome of heat, but if the soil is still wet, that impacts on how hot you can get. So we're just taking a look at odds of hitting 100 degrees. When you have a drought in place or the ground is very dry, you haven't seen rain for 2 or 3 weeks, the ground absorbs the sun's energy very quickly and it heats up very quickly. That's why, say in like Phoenix, Arizona, it's desert. You have a lot of sand, you have a lot of dirt, not a lot of vegetation in that parts of the country. So that's why they get extreme heat pretty much on a daily basis in the summer. Temperatures are well above 100 degrees because that desert absorbs that heat very quickly and the temperatures go soaring. But here in Arkansas, we had a wet May, we had shower and thunderstorms in June for a large part. We have a lot of soil moisture in place. So the sun goes into more work evaporating that moisture in the soil, and that's known as evaporative cooling. You're saying, okay, what is evaporative cooling? Well, think about it this way. You get out of the pool, there's not a lot of humidity in the air. What happens? You get goosebumps. And why is that the case? Because those droplets of water are evaporating very quickly, and it's so quickly that it takes energy for those droplets to go from a water phase to a gas phase or a vapor phase. It's taking the heat away from the surrounding environment. So you get that cooling sensation, hence that's why you get goosebumps when there's not a lot of humidity in the air and you jump out of the pool. If there's more humidity in the air, you don't get that effect. So that's what evaporative cooling is. You see the temperatures are going to be just a little bit cooler than would it be if the ground was entirely dry and we were dealing with a drought situation. Also, that moisture goes up into the atmosphere, and typically you have those fair weather cumulus clouds that pop up. We've seen that over the past few days here in Arkansas. And you can have pop-up shower thunderstorm as well. So let's talk about some of the hottest temperatures that have ever been recorded in the natural state. And these records really go back into the 1800s or the 1890s. The hottest temperature at Little Rock, 114. The hottest temperature at Conway hit 115. 115 in Hot Springs. You get the idea. Everybody was well into the triple digits with those very hot statistics. But the hottest temperature recorded in the entire state of Arkansas was 120 degrees, and that was Ozark in Franklin County. So yes, it can get hot here in Arkansas. And here's the breakdown of other hottest Arkansas temperatures on record. Boonville, 118. That 120 that happened August 10th, 1936. Subiaco, 117. Texarkana, 117. Ozark, 116. So you get the idea. Now, for Little Rock, the hottest temperature was August 3rd, 2011, with 114 degrees. So Mercury climbed up to 112, July 31st, 1986. Up to 111, July 30th, 2012. And then also 108, July 28th, back in 2012. When you have a stretch of very dry weather, that's when you get most 100-degree days, typically. And we've had 47 of those triple-digit days back in 1980. So that's the record for the most times we've hit this century mark, at least at Little Rock Airport. 2012, it was 29 days, 2000, 26 days, 2010, 21 days, and on average, we see about 7 or 8 days where we reach 100 degrees at Little Rock. A heat wave. What is a heat wave? Well, in our perspective here in Arkansas, we say a heat wave is when you have 3 consecutive days of 95 degrees or higher. And the longest stretch of a heat wave, that was 32 days, July 28th, all the way through August 28th back in 1980. So 1980 was certainly a very hot year. And then 29 days, that was the longest heat wave after that, August 1st through August 29th back in 2007. But as we all know, it's not always just about the heat or the temperature. It's about the humidity. So here we go. The heat index, or the feels like, the hottest feels like temperature recorded at Little Rock, 122 back in 1998. But that pales in comparison to, say, what people in the Middle East experience. Saudi Arabia, for example, dew point, 95 degrees. I can't even imagine what that feels like. That's certainly the air that you can wear. It's just so thick out there. But July 8th, 2003, the heat index, or the feels like, in a part of Saudi Arabia, topped out at 178 degrees. And last year, unofficially, there was a report in Iran of seeing a heat index value of 180 degrees. Coming up next on WeatherWise, we're going to talk about how they calculate the heat index, or the feels like temperature, and also something that may be more useful than the heat index. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now we're going to be talking about the heat index, or the feels like temperature, because a lot of people are like, what exactly is that? So we're trying to figure out how your body can cool down enough to where it's not going to experience heat-related illness. And the way we do that is because sweat, when you sweat, that is your body's natural AC. When that sweat evaporates, that's your body cooling down. When you have more moisture in the atmosphere or in the environment, that sweat does not evaporate as fast, or it may not evaporate at all. So the heat index is pretty much how your skin feels with all that moisture still attached to it, and therefore your body can't cool down sufficiently. Here's the long equation. I'm not going to go over it with you, but it takes into account, of course, the temperature and also the relative humidity to come up with a calculated value. There's no way to see an observed value of heat index. There's no instrument to measure heat index. It's all determined by a calculation. And when we take a look at the heat index values on when you really want to start to pay special attention, it is going to be pretty much once you get 105 or higher. So here's a breakdown that we use here at THV11. When the heat index is 95 to 100, that's when you want to use a caution. Not a big deal, but still, you can experience heat-related illness if you really are not paying attention whatsoever. Then 100 to 105, very typical here in Arkansas, just under that threshold of a heat advisory, which is once you get to 105 to 110, that's when it's dangerous. That's when heat stroke or heat exhaustion is a possibility. And then once it's 110 or higher, that's extreme heat. That's when they issue an extreme heat warning, which used to be excessive heat warning, is now an extreme heat warning, and that can be life-threatening because you're more susceptible to getting heat stroke or heat exhaustion. So those are some things you really want to keep in mind. This is the chart that the National Weather Service uses. And here you go, looking at this chart. I'll zoom in a little bit more so you can see it a little bit better. So here's the breakdown of just the heat index. And there's the values with temperature on the left-hand side and the relative humidity at the top. So we said, okay, the temperature is 90 degrees and we have a relative humidity of 50%, it's going to feel like 95. That's in the caution range. But then if we have a relative humidity, say, of 70%, that is getting into more of the dangerous range, 106. And then, of course, see if it was 92 with 72% humidity or 70% humidity, you're up to 112 for a heat index value. It's not the best tool to use at all times. And there you see for Little Rock, the heat index, once it gets up to 105, or the temperature, the air temperature is 103 or greater, they'll issue a heat advisory. And then when the heat index value reaches 110, or the air temperature is 105 or greater, they'll issue an excessive heat warning. I mentioned we have another value we use, and a lot of coaches use this for athletes, and I think this is the direction we'll be going in over the next several years as they start to phase out the heat index value. And here's the reason behind that. Let's take a look at this, the heat index versus the WBGT, which stands for wet bulb globe temperature. And this is a much better value to use because the wet bulb globe temperature factors in the sun angle for the time of year. It's measured in direct sunlight. It uses cloud cover along with humidity, temperature, and it uses wind. You probably have noticed that when we're like, okay, it feels like 105 degrees out there, but if you have a wind at 20 miles per hour, that wind is helping out with evaporation of your sweat. So therefore, that feels like value may not be the greatest thing to use, and you more likely want to use the wet bulb globe temperature. So what is the wet bulb globe temperature? So this is a value, we'll go back over to Storm Track 11 now. This is a value that basically tells you how much can your body cool down given the environment. And what they do is basically you have a regular bulb thermometer, wrap a wet cloth around it, to kind of portray your skin and sweat in that aspect. And this will give you a better idea on heat stress and how heat stress it can go into more significant problems such as heat stroke and also heat exhaustion. So when we take a look at the wet bulb globe temperature, this is the breakdown for that. So normal activities, under 82, you're good. Once you get to 82, between 86.9, discretion is advised for intense or prolonged exercise. And there you see 87 to 89.9. Football players restricted to helmet, shoulder pads, and short practices. All sports must be 20 minutes of rest breaks. And then the worst is once you get over 92. No outdoor workouts because your body just cannot cool down enough and you can get into extreme trouble very quickly. Let's take a look at an example here. And this is from the National Weather Service out of Tulsa. And you could just Google this, WBGT. Very easy to do. But you see all the different parameters here on the side. So we have the month, the day, the latitude, the dew point, the relative humidity. So I have the latitude on Little Rock, Arkansas for the month of June. It's the 24th of June. And let's just say that we have no wind. It's dead calm. There's nothing moving around whatsoever. And the maximum temperature is going to be 96 degrees. Our wet bulb globe temperature is 90. Your heat index is 108. So yes, of course, that's going to be significant, and they're going to issue a heat advisory with that forecast. But now, let's say the wind's coming up. It's coming up about 20 miles per hour. Your wet bulb globe temperature goes down, but your heat index remains the same. Your wind helps out with evaporative cooling of your sweat. So your wet bulb globe temperature is going to be a more reliable value versus the heat index. Let's go to change this from 88, and now let's increase the dew point. Let's say it's 88 and the dew point is 79. So there you see heat index 103. Your wet bulb globe temperature is 84. We see this a lot in the beginning of the day, 81, 79. So you can just use this as real time. And this is for coaches, and this is for anybody that does outdoor activities to figure out, okay, how serious is this? By using the wet bulb globe temperature, it is a much more realistic value because it is not just calculated, but it really tells you exactly how much heat stress you may experience by looking at that value. And once again, this is all a part of the National Weather Service. You just have to Google it. So I would definitely use the wet bulb globe temperature, and I think the National Weather Service is headed in that direction to phase out heat index, just because the heat index does not account for your indirect sunlight, does not account for cloud cover, does not account for the wind. It's a value that is not as impressive compared to the wet bulb globe temperature. Unfortunately, we don't have that access to show a map here on THV11. Hopefully that will be available soon, but you can always look at the National Weather Service for forecast values, and once again, just by Googling them. We'll wrap things up here on WeatherWise, talking about heat-related illnesses. What exactly is heat stroke and heat exhaustion, coming up. We're very serious about heat. All meteorologists are. That's because heat is the #1 weather-related killer here in the U.S. So when you take a look at the statistics, the 10-year average from 2015 through 2024, #1 is heat. 177 people lost their lives because of heat. Flood, 145. Rip currents, which may be surprising, 76. So know about rip currents before you head down to the beaches, the Gulf, or the Atlantic Ocean, because people inland sometimes forget that, yeah, there's currents that can pull you out, and if you don't know what you're doing and how to get out of them, you can get in trouble real fast. Wind, 58, tornadoes, 48, hurricanes, 27, and lightning, on average, for 10 years, has killed about 19 people. So we talk about heat. Let's go over Storm Track 11 because we're continuing to really focus on how heat can impact parts of the country. This is from the National Weather Service, or actually from the Weather Prediction Center, which is under the umbrella of NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, and this is an experimental product, but we have shown this on air from time to time, and this shows how much impacts the heat could have over the next several days. So this example is from the 24th of June, and you see the purples, the magentas, that is where the most heat impacts is expected. The Mid-Atlantic into Ohio. This takes into account how abnormally warm it is for this time of year and other factors as well to figure out this map. So you really want to be in the yellow or the oranges for the most part. There you see yellow, minor. This level of heat affects primarily those individuals extremely sensitive to heat. Orange, moderate. This level of heat affects most individuals sensitive to heat, especially those without effective cooling and adequate hydration. Number 3, major, the red. This level of heat affects anyone without effective cooling and adequate hydration. Impacts likely in some health systems, heat-sensitive industries, and infrastructure. And magenta, that's extreme. This level of rare or long-duration extreme heat with little to no relief, even during the overnight, can impact people, and people can experience heat-related sicknesses. So let's go through this week and see how it changes. And you see, primarily, it stays focused over the Ohio Valley and also the Mid-Atlantic, but the ridge will start to loosen its grip, and therefore the conditions won't be as extreme. You can find that on National Weather Service. Just Google NWS heat risk. So we talk about heat-related illnesses. Let's go over to Max now, because this is what you really want to keep in mind throughout the summer season, and don't write anything off. So let's start off with heat exhaustion. So this is not as severe as a heat stroke, but if you're outside, you're feeling faint, dizzy, that's one sign. Excessive sweating, your skin is cool, pale, clammy, or you see somebody with cool, pale, clammy skin. Rapid or weak pulse, muscle cramps. The action you need to take: get to a cool, air-conditioned place, drink water if conscious, take a cool shower, or use a cold compress. Cool shower, not a cold shower, because that probably puts your body in a little bit of shock. Heat stroke, you don't want to take a chance with that at all. If you are experiencing this, you need to call 911 immediately. Throbbing headache, no sweating, red, hot, dry skin, rapid, strong pulse, and the person may lose consciousness. So we don't want you to get to any of these levels. And how do you stay safe from heat? Of course, limit your time outdoors. Limit your time out in full sunlight. I know there's a lot of people that work outdoors. Drink a lot of water. Have salty snacks. That's important. Drink something with electrolytes. Just be smart. Try to get your outdoor chores done early in the morning or late in the evening. You don't want to be out doing chores, if possible, 11 o'clock all the way until 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's the peak heating of the day, and that's when you most likely will experience heat-related illnesses. Don't forget the pets, okay? Be observant. When you're in a parking lot and you see windows cracked, maybe just walk over and take a glance and see if there's a pet in there. And if there is, in this case, when you have temperatures this warm into the 90s, you need to call authorities. If it's a pet, you want to call 911 dispatch, maybe not so much the 911 number, but that pet can experience a life-threatening sickness in a short amount of time with illness. And also, this should not be said, but you don't leave your kids in the car. No pets, no kids in the car, doesn't matter if the windows are cracked or not. If they're not in an AC vehicle, with AC turned on, then they could suffer significant impacts from heat and they may not make it. So we always do heat-related stories and try to give you tips as much as possible, but you always hear those terrible stories, whether it's a pet, whether it's a kid. That should not be happening because people should be using common sense. Thanks for watching. Weatherwise, always want to hear from you. Please let me know what topics you want me to discuss on future episodes. You can send them to me. Just email nscott@thv11.com, or you can go ahead and direct message me on my Facebook page. I hope you stay cool, stay refreshed, and also don't forget to check on your neighbors if they don't have any cooling ways to get through this summer heat. We'll get through it, but of course, it's Arkansas, and it's going to be hot and humid, and it's going to be sweaty out there. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.